In the headlines tonight, the terrorist TPLF launches fresh attack against Ethiopia. Ethiopia downs aircraft transporting weapons to terrorist TPLF. Good evening to you all. A very warm welcome to ETV News. I am Grum Tariku. Ethiopia vowed to defend itself from the TPLF's fresh aggression. According to a statement, the terrorist TPLF has launched attack in Eastern Front in violation of ceasefire and defying the ongoing peace talks efforts. The TPLF unashamedly released its own statement accusing Ethiopia of launching a military attack this morning at 5 a.m. around Chobaber, Janora, Yalo, Alamata, and Bala areas. Binyam Alamayo presents Goshu Melisso's file.
The statement recalled that the government declared unilateral ceasefire immediately after the terrorist group had been wiped out of Amhara and Afar states and facilitated unfettered humanitarian access to Tigray. Consequently, the government has arranged all the necessary conditions for continued humanitarian access to the Tigray state and delivered food and non-food items and medicines and other needed supplies to the people in the state, according to the statement. It went on to recall that the government released high-profile prisoners who were leaders of the terrorist group in its continued efforts for peace, the statement said. Main Peace Committee has been established to speed up the process and ensure that the conflict is peacefully resolved. Efforts are also underway, it said, to commence restoration of social service institutions and infrastructure damaged by the terrorist group in the state. The terrorist group has also been reverberating false accusations against the government as if the peace process failed as a pretext to continue its belligerence. And defying the peace process, the TPLF has continued belligerence and started beating the war drum and eventually launched an attack in the Eastern Front, particularly in Bisober, Zobel, and Takulesh directions since 5 a.m. in early morning. The National Defense Forces and all security forces are countering the attack by the TPLF in a coordinated manner. The TPLF is a pathological liar. A day after a video of the TPLF leader Debretsion Gebremichael that shows him mobilizing war during an engagement with residents of Mekelle is released on social media, the Tigray Military Command released a statement accusing Ethiopian government of no military offensive. The statement that was published by Dimtsi Wayane television on Wednesday said that the Western Command shelled our troops' position on August 15. It did not say if there was a casualty on the part of the TPLF. However, it said that it investigated whether the offensive was initiated by commanders of the Western Front or by the Ethiopian government. And the TPLF claimed that the offensive had authorization from the Ethiopian government. Ethiopia said the reappearance of sympathizers of the terrorist group and reemergence of their social campaign is taken by the government as a propaganda support for preparations the junta is carrying out to declare war on the nation. The government of Ethiopia strongly believes that the peaceful alternative is vital to address problems faced by the people of Tigray. The government also called on the international community to push TPLF to desist from mobilizing youth towards peace and stop beating the war drum. If the terrorist group continues its aggression, the government will be forced to exercise its legal, historical, and moral obligation to defend the nation from any threat The National Army is ready to safeguard peace and security of citizens from threats posed by the TPLF. The government and all the security forces are in a better position to deter any attack and push the terrorist group into peaceful solution, the statement added.
In a related development, the fighting that erupted this morning marks the end of a ceasefire that has been in place since March and could worsen the humanitarian crisis in that part of the country. The invasion by the TPLF has splashed cold water on Ethiopia's effort to find a peaceful remedy to the situation in that part of the country. To elaborate more on this and discuss further, I'm now joined over the phone by Alamayo Reda, a peace and conflict analyst. And thank you, Dr. Alamayo, for joining me.
Thank you for having me on your program.
Okay, Dr. Alamayo, my first question would be, why is the TPLF, especially at this juncture, going against the peace efforts, and which would be actually at the expense of the lives of innocent civilians?
In fact, I wish I know the exact motive of the TPLF, why it is undertaking such unfortunate aggression. It shows that the TPLF is very careless about the lives and the livings of the Tigrayan people. It has now, in fact, nulled and void the ceasefire. It has already started the fighting. So I am sure it is not going to be easy for it, because the Ethiopian forces are better organized. That's what I imagine. It is unfortunate that the Tigrayan people are going to suffer more now.
Okay, Dr. Alamayo, again, the TPLF is spreading lies that Ethiopia has started or launched the attack. And the surprising fact is some Western media have just picked and are making false allegations against the Ethiopian government. And at the same time, the international community has failed to grasp the reality. What's your take on this, Dr. Alamayo?
In fact, you see, this has been orchestrated for a very long time, not only by the TPLF, by its supporters, media, and other supporters in the West, especially the European Union and the United States. Mind you, it has been very much encouraged. TPLF has very much been encouraged by the representatives of the United States and the European Union. When they visited Mekelle, they were busy taking selfies with the rebel leaders. They have been encouraged. You see, they know this. They know who started the war. Even the areas where the aggression is taking place is very far from Mekelle. It is very near to the Ethiopian border, mind you. And nobody can prove that Ethiopia started this war, and they know it. They know it, you see. They have their satellite image before them. They know who started the war. But this is a proxy war, you see. The TPLF is just a weapon for the United States and the European Union, especially those who are very much interested to disgrace Ethiopia. So they know it, and I don't think this is a misunderstanding or a misinformation. This is an orchestrated activity on behalf of the TPLF.
Dr. Alamayo Reda, a peace and conflict analyst, thank you for your time. Meanwhile, the Ethiopian government has been warning international community time and again that TPLF has been looting fuel and humanitarian aid only to be fallen in deaf ears. Now what has been done has become too conspicuous. According to a government statement, it has been really disclosed. It has already disclosed that TPLF looted 500,000 liters of fuel, steamed and stole humanitarian aid, in furthering the recent attack it launched. Apart from the 2 tankers of fuel which were flagrantly looted, 10 tankers have already been missed. TPLF not only looted but also imprisoned staffs who resisted the looting. Government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia demands WFP and OCHA to issue statements condemning such inhumane and criminal act. International community should now act swiftly to ensure accountability. According to the statement, the government will be obliged to block the flow of fuel and aid unless international community would take the issue seriously. We don't beef up terrorism, otherwise strong condemnation with accountability must be visible, says the statement from the government. The development as the TPLF presses ahead with its warmongering, its fabrication of what has become known as Tigray genocide is being exposed. The ethnic-based divisions and animosity cultivated in Ethiopian society over the years, while TPLF was on power, provided the terrorist group with an ideal setting to pursue its evil agenda. Every time an individual or group demand for their right to be respected, says Yohannes Melaku, an Ethiopian political analyst and researcher, in an article that TPLF rebranded them as an act of incitement for genocidal violence against Tigrayans. Tigresa has more on this.
It's counterintuitive but true, says Melaku in an article published on Star. He goes on to say that the TPLF worked hard to have genocide committed against the innocent people of Tigray that it has taken hostage, but Ethiopia has denied TPLF that opportunity at enormous cost. Ethiopia now needs to focus on disabling and disbanding the hostage takers once and for all, lest they might not be as lucky next time. Israel and Rwanda achieved them because their society lived in the shadow of a history of genocidal cruelty. The TPLF does not own a region or a country blessed with a plentiful supply of oil. So Israel and Rwanda seem to provide the only potentially viable model for TPLF to try to emulate. There is evidence that the TPLF has closely studied post-genocide Rwanda. There is a deceptive simplicity in the way TPLF thinking goes. If a minority constituting 14% of national population could be threatened with near extermination in Rwanda, then with manipulation, incitement, persistent and systematic provocation and sinister propaganda, TPLF could find it relatively easy to get a few Tigrayans killed and build a plausible case of genocide. The TPLF's journey to reach here had several distinct steps. The TPLF anointed itself as the sole representative of the people of Tigray. The TPLF rewrote history of Tigray as one of victimhood that dates at least to 1889, when Emperor Menelik II moved the Ethiopian capital to its current location and purportedly deprived Tigrayans of their rightful place as a center of political power in Ethiopian history. On taking power in Addis Ababa in 1991, it introduced ethnicity as a defining source of identity for all Ethiopians and repartitioned the country along linguistic lines. It established a quasi-apartheid system in which ethnic Tigrayans, but only those close to it, systematically controlled the political, security, economic sectors in the country. Every time an individual or group demanded the rights to be respected, TPLF rebranded them as act of incitement for genocidal violence against Tigrayans, thereby justifying resort to extreme violence in the name of averting it.
Meanwhile, a plane believed to be the property of historical enemies who wanted to destabilize Ethiopia and have been supporting the TPLF for centuries was shot down by the heroic Ethiopian Air Force. The plane was downed while carrying weapons for the terrorist group and violating Ethiopian airspace via Sudan, the National Defense Forces announced it. Habtam Ashagri compiles the following report.
The historical enemies of Ethiopia are trying to provide military assistance to the terrorist TPLF. As part of this move, the plane believed to be carry heavy artillery from Sudan has downed by Ethiopian Air Force today. The Air Force retweeted that the army remains on guard of any possible invasion by the TPLF. Major General Tesfaye Ayalew, head of Defense Force Deployment, told the Ethiopian news agency that the terrorist group, which has been making extensive military preparations for the past several months, is finally flexing muscles for a showdown at border areas.
በዚሁ ዕለት ወደ 3 ተኩል አካባቢ
The heroic Air Force has managed to shoot down a plane which violated our airspace. The plane tore into our territory at 9:30 a.m. this morning. It carried weapons to the TPLF. Thus, we took this appropriate measure.
ስለዚህም እርምጃ ተወስዶበታል ማለት ነው።
Ayalew also pointed out that the TPLF was constantly opening fire and attacking the National Defense Forces while coming up with bare-faced lies that Ethiopia launched fresh attacks.
ከሌሊቱ 11 ሰዓት ጀምሮ ውጊያ ከፍቷል። ውጊያው ቦታዎቹ በቆቦ ግራና ቀኝ ሆኖ
launched fresh attack at 5 p.m. in the Kobo area as well as Mount Zobo in the Amhara state. The TPLF also mounted attack at the Gisober area in Afar state.
ለፊት እንዲሁም በቢሶበር በአፋር
The federal government is always as good as any possible attack by this terrorist group.
In another development, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, has pledged humanitarian assistance worth $5.1 million to people affected by conflict and drought in several parts of Ethiopia. The assistance has been announced by UNICEF Deputy Director Jane Mutia, who conferred with the Women and Social Affairs Minister of Ethiopia, Ergoge Tesfaye, here in Addis Ababa. Ergoge Tesfaye praised the UNICEF for its humanitarian support and mental health services to people affected by the conflict, calling for continued assistance to war-affected people in Afar and Amhara states, as well as those in Oromia and southern nations, nationalities and people's states. Responding to the request forwarded by the minister, Jane Muta affirmed UNICEF's commitment to deliver $5.1 million support to those affected by the man-made and natural disasters in the aforementioned parts of Ethiopia.
That I stand here before you, bearing witness to this momentous day, which marks the birth of a new era for this great nation.
Ensuring peace and security across the nation should be the top priority of the new government.
From the Ministry of Agriculture, from the Minister himself, the country has prepared about 13.2 million hectares of land for crop production, out of which 12 point something has been. In general, 93% is going to produce, and we expect 374 million.
Certain fundamental issues that are basics, that are necessary to launch the country towards democracy and prosperity. So in that regard, I think building national consensus on the fundamentals. Naturally, we cannot agree on everything.
Japanese ambassador to Ethiopia says her country is keen to maintain age-long relations with Ethiopia in development projects. The ambassador pointed out that Japan is ready to accelerate infrastructure development in Ethiopia. Kasaunchani reports.
In an exclusive interview with BBC English, Japanese ambassador to Ethiopia said Tokyo is committed to bolster ties with Ethiopian development endeavors. Ambassador Takako added that Ethiopia and Japan have also carried out a high-level industrialization policy dialogue.
Japan and Ethiopia have been enjoying a long and friendly relationship over 90 years. And I would say we are very, very similar in terms of having a unique culture, long history, and also trying to have the regional influence in respective region. While Japan is a rapidly aging country, but Ethiopia has a young population that is growing. So I think we have a great potential to cooperate together. Yes, in historical terms, we had the first, after the war, the first state guest was from Ethiopia. And then at first Tokyo Olympic Games, Addis Ababa, Ababa Bikila was a very, very famous winner of the marathon. And 50 years ago, Japan started to have this cooperation with Ethiopia through JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. So I think we will continue to enjoy the great relationship.
Elaborating on the wide range of cooperation with Ethiopia's ambassador Poonana did, it is about time for her country to capitalize on the people and infrastructure in Ethiopia.
We have a lot of the countries to cooperate, but our basic policy is to meet with the needs and the desire of the recipient country. That is no difference in terms of our cooperation with Ethiopia. So our strength is to invest in people and try to grow together. Another strength is a quality infrastructure. So during the time of the former Prime Minister Meles, there was a high-level dialogue for policy forum for industry development. And that is the one way of listening to the voice of Ethiopian needs and also what Japan can offer to Ethiopia. I think this is the way to grow together. And one of the areas that has been successful is Kaizen, the continuous improvement that would enhance the productivity, efficiency of the companies here or the organization here so that they can have more productivity with less cost, more profit.
Ethio-Japan relations stretch back to 90 years. During the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, the Japanese worked towards economic goals with Ethiopians in an attempt to expand Japan's trade with the rest of the world.
Ethiopian ambassador to China, Teshome Toga, briefed President of China Africa Institute, CAI, Li Shenfeng, and Horn of Africa scholars at the institute on the current internal situation in Ethiopia. The ambassador mainly focused on the war in northern Ethiopia, the peace negotiation process, and the National Dialogue Commission. While explaining about the war in the northern part of Ethiopia, the ambassador noted that the government was forced to engage in this war after it had made multiple efforts to avoid the war from the start. Professor Li Shenfeng, on his part, thanked the ambassador for briefing him and his team in person rather than hearing about it from the media. He also noted his institution will continue to work with the embassy very closely in future engagements.
ጊዜ ይለዋወጣል እኛ ግን ጸንተን እንቆማለን ሀገር ማለት እኛ ነን
You're watching Addis News Hour.
Stories that happened regarding Ethiopia over the past 24 hours.
Okay, there have been just a handful of stories, but for the time being, I've just chosen two of them, which are for.
Most trending issues that have been making headlines in the past couple of days.
Yeah, I have assessed the media and I have seen tweets of the Prime Minister.
Japanese External Trade Organization JETRO and leaders of business delegation from Japan expressed interest to engage in various investment areas and exploring favorable investment conditions across Ethiopia. JETRO opened its 55th office in Ethiopia in 2016 as Japanese investors explored Ethiopia's potentials. JETRO is reputed for its immense contribution in accelerating Japanese government's business relations and investment with the rest of the world. Japanese ambassador to Ethiopia, Ito Takako, said JETRO has various outstanding contributions besides launching websites in Ethiopia.
Continue to provide Japanese business community with a detailed institutional information on trade and investment in Ethiopia, and launched a website to disseminate information on Ethiopian economy to Japanese companies, corresponding more than 1,000 inquiries. Before the COVID-19 pandemics, he organized 25 business seminars, which means in 4 years before the COVID-19, there was a seminar by JETRO every 2 months. He also directed annually business missions of Japanese companies to this country. As a result, more Japanese companies have become interested in trade and investment in Ethiopia. There is no doubt that he has played a significant role for inviting investments by JTI and Safaricom in Ethiopia, and their subsequent business activities.
The outgoing JETRO Director General Takao Seki also said Ethiopia and Japan have great potential.
JETRO is a primary contact point for every Japanese business when they start exploring a new market, either for trade or investment. We are always keen to provide useful information for their decision making and various opportunities, including dispatching business delegation, holding business seminars, B2B business matching, and the sector aligning the policy direction of our host economy. During my tenure, because JETRO had to start from scratch, we had to learn Ethiopia a lot. Otherwise, we could not start any support for business. But what I have learned is all dependent on you. I did not know anything about Ethiopia before I came here in March 2016, more than 6 years ago. I learned everything from you. So I and JETRO owe you a lot. I would pay for it whenever the chance arises when I go back to Japan.
The newly appointed JETRO Director General Yasuhiro Nakayama also underscored that exerting maximum efforts to further accelerate business relations with Ethiopia remains a topmost priority.
I have just arrived at Ethiopia 6 days before, but I already getting a lot of inspirations here. And I'm excited to discover the potentials of Ethiopia during my period. So, Mr. Seki, my predecessor, have had a work 6 days and 6 years and a half, but so not only succeeding the work of Mr. Seki, I'll do my 120% of my effort to create and discover the possibilities of business between these countries. This is my third mission working abroad. Last 2 times was in Central and South America, and actually this is my first time working in Africa. So this is my great experience, and I'm so excited working here. My hobby is, well, I was doing triathlon when I was in university, so I'm thinking of training, running in Ethiopia. And also, I am addicted of coffee. I was drinking coffee 3 or 4 cups a day. So I suppose this assignment was a kind of destiny. Well, and finally, I'm wishing to create the great connections between the members who have participating tonight. Thank you. Batam Amsagnaro.
It was also noted that due to sweeping reforms in Ethiopia, various Japanese investors are engaged in various investment areas at the moment, assisting industrialization.
Ethiopia is implementing a green legacy initiative over the past 3 years. The nation target is to plant over 20 billion young trees across the country. This project invites neighboring countries like Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and Kenya.
Ethiopia's microeconomy remains hopeful despite many challenges. ETV English will look into this in greater details through fresh stories and news analysis. Coming to you this August.
In August, top stories on Addis News Hour. After the conflict in the northern parts of Ethiopia, the TPLF is preparing another wage of war against Ethiopia. ETV Language is discussing these matters with professionals, experts, politicians, even government officials. We brought this information on Addis News Hour. Stay tuned to ETV Languages.
And finally, Sudan's National Civil Defense Council says the number of deaths resulting from torrential rains and flooding in the African country has risen to 89. Over 50,000 homes across the country have either been completely or partially destroyed. Take a look.
This is the aftermath of heavy rains in Gezira State, East Central Sudan. Homes and public facilities are submerged, and the only way to make it to safer ground is to wade through the water, like Asma Nureldin.
This is my house and nothing is left of it. No bed, no chair, no TV, nothing is left. It had 3 bedrooms and now everything is broken. We own nothing. We're living at the school.
She's among the 146,000 people who have been affected by the ravaging floods in Sudan since torrential rains began in May. Despite being homeless, some remain optimistic, saying their situation could have been worse.
This is God's fate, and we are thankful it wasn't an earthquake or a fire that burnt us. We are alive, and that's a blessing, and whatever God brings. So if it is not caused by humans, it's good. We are satisfied and thankful to God with whatever is brought to us.
They're now living in these temporary camps provided by humanitarian agencies. The United Nations says at least 25,000 homes have been destroyed. It also says the hardest hit areas are in Kassala, South Darfur, Central Darfur, South Kordofan, White Nile and River Nile provinces. Gezira State sits right in the middle of the White Nile and the Blue Nile. People here often experience heavy flooding whenever torrential rains fall, but recently they have become more severe. Experts say they are the worst floods in 60 years, and they blame global warming and climate change for the shocks.
Over now to a quick reminder of the headlines. The terrorist TPLF launches fresh attack against Ethiopia. Ethiopia downs aircraft transporting weapons to terrorist TPLF. Well, you have been watching ETV News. Thanks for your company and have a great time.